Hi there. I'm about to do a quick 8-lap race around Bridgehampton in the 1952 Ferrari 500. It's quite an interesting car with an interesting story, and yeah, gonna see what happens. A 16-car grid. I'm not going to be pushing super hard for a win. It's going to be more of just driving around and enjoying myself. But we'll see what happens. Maybe a good result is going to happen, but who knows. 6 lights up. Off for away. Well, slow start from the AI, that just seems to be what it's like in Assetto Corsa. They love doing slow starts. Cut through the field. Now, all these cars are the same. Oh, I just jumped into the lead, okay. Yeah, AI is not great at the starts. So, interesting thing about this car is that it raced in the 1952 F1 season, obviously, but it was built to F2. It was built to F2 regulations rather than F1 because that's what they decided in 1952 for whatever reason. And another interesting fact is that in 1952, I'm fairly certain that every single race that season was won by Ferrari. Alberto Ascari won his first championship with this car, and he won every single except one race, all but one. Very dominant, and the one race that he missed was only because he was contesting the Indy 500 that year, and that's why he missed it. But I don't remember who replaced him, who replaced Ascari for that one race that he missed, but they won that race anyway. So, very interesting story with this car. And I think this car, I mean, obviously it looks quite simple. It's just it's just basically a tube with wheels on it, but I still think it's quite a good looking car. Whoa. Okay, yeah. That's not good. Stop. Okay, let's try to get back on the road without hitting anyone. There you go. Yeah, I got a bit overconfident there. And I'm not sure what's happening, but the AI seem to be awfully slow with this current track combo. We'll just pretend that spin didn't happen. Just see how easily I'm catching up to them. That's interesting. This car is quite slidey. Not the easiest thing to drive, but personally I'm aware of how many people love vintage cars, and I do love vintage F1 as well, but I'm aware of how many people love the 60s F1 cars, you know, like Grand Prix Legends. There are a ton of people who still play that game, and some people almost exclusively only drive the vintage F1 cars. But me personally, I never really got that attached to the 1960s cars, and find myself more interested in the 50s cars, because it's really interesting to me how these are essentially the first crop of F1 cars that existed, so I find them interesting. And also the fact that they're very commonly easier to drive, so that also helps. get a good run on this guy. Now I don't remember if I mentioned this, but all these cars are identical. They are all just a Ferrari 500, but they have different skins. As you can see, the colors to sort of simulate a grid, but they are all the same car. And yeah, I'm not sure why, but they are so slow here. Well, we're getting some good speed now. Let's try not to put it in a tree. Yeah, I'm not really sure what's happening. Why the AI are so slow through this track. It often seems almost random when you pick a car on a track, put AI on it. It's like half the time the AI are like insanely fast and I can barely keep up, or they're really slow for whatever reason. Kind of gonna be a boring race, but even just driving around is a lot of fun. Because for me personally, I don't have to be fighting wheel to wheel every lap for me to have fun in sim racing, in any sim. For example, I also play a lot of the modern F1 games, and I know maybe it's just because I'm not an amazing driver, but I find myself driving around in like, let's say 16th or something for like most of the race. Whoa! Okay, this was scary as hell, but like I said, I often find myself towards the back fighting for like 16th or 15th or something. But even then, I have fun, because just driving, a purpose-built race car around the track that was also purpose-built for that purpose. I just find the whole, how do I call it, like the whole process of a race or a Grand Prix to be just really interesting, and just driving. Even if I'm not, fighting for a win or a championship, I just really enjoy it. Just the act of driving. And this is no different. These vintage cars are some of the most fun to drive, because they have such interesting characteristics. For example, if you drive more modern cars, like let's say modern GT cars, obviously they're all unique in their own ways and interesting as well, but these vintage cars, each one is often completely different and acts completely different. Even if, let's say you assemble a whole grid of some series or specific, championship, and they could be from the same year, from the same set of regulations, but they're just completely different a lot of the time, and that's just really interesting to me. And it seems like as motorsport and especially F1 went along, cars just sort of became very similar and almost the same these days. For me, one of the most interesting parts of vintage F1, especially the 70s, 80s, even the 90s sometimes, is how different every team's interpretation of the rule set is. Like, especially in the 70s, you would see some crazy looking designs for the cars, because nobody yet really understood what's the best thing to do, the best way to make the car fast, so everybody was innovating in different ways. Some of it didn't go all that well, some of it does, and it's so interesting. and I really enjoy just learning about uh, vintage racing of any kind. It doesn't have to be Formula One. I do really enjoy the modern F1 games because I know a lot of people say, oh, you know, it's not a simulator or it's not realistic or this and that. But for me, I really just enjoy it because first of all, I'm a huge fan of Formula One. And Formula One games are what got me into sim racing in the first place. Because my first sort of sim was F1 2018. It was the first F1 game I played and the first time I just became actually interested in cars and racing in general. So it got me to sim racing. I started playing F1 games. Then eventually, I think the first, you could say, actual sim I actually got was Project Cars 2. Really enjoyed that one. Eventually got Assetto Corsa. And while I do really love the F1 games, what I really wish for is, like a lot of people also agree with me and say the same thing, is for essentially a new Grand Prix Legends. Something like that. Even it doesn't even have to be the same, 1965 or whatever season it simulates. It could be even the 50s. That would be extremely interesting, or the 70s, 80s. Just a dedicated sim for vintage racing. Honestly, it doesn't even have to be Formula One. I would prefer it to be Formula, but even if it's just like something like 80s or 90s GT cars, that's what it simulates. Even that would be extremely interesting. So honestly, I just don't really expect it to happen. Maybe indie developer could do it, but if that does happen, obviously it's extremely unlikely that they'll have the licensing for the actual cars and teams. And it's just, I think it's unlikely, not because some people say, oh, it's licensing issues, it would be difficult. I really don't think that's the case because, I mean, Grand Prix Legends did it. I don't see why someone else can't, but one of the biggest issues is I don't think anyone could really convince a publisher that this would be a good idea to make a game or simulator like that. Sure, like Formula One games, obviously there's a huge, massive fan base for Formula One all over the world, so of course games like that sell well. That's making a Formula One game is just almost guaranteed money and success. Like that's just how it is. There's a huge audience for it, but honestly, I don't think you could convince a big publisher that a simulation of 1970s F1 is going to sell. Because as much as we want it, in the sim racing community, I don't think the vast majority of people, even if they are Formula 1 fans, they probably don't really care about that, let's be real. They probably don't. Because the people who really enjoy these vintage cars and this vintage racing in general, they're a very small number of racing fans. Let's just be real. This is the vast majority are on iRacing, racing GT cars or LMP cars, stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just how it is. I would love a vintage sim as much as anyone, but I'm not holding my breath for it to happen. The one interesting thing happening is a game on Steam called Formula Circus. It's only just been revealed, we don't know anything about it really as far as I know. Or at least I myself don't know much. But from what I can tell, it's going to be more focused on older racing. And I'm assuming it's not going to be licensed, but more likely fictionalized. But from the pictures or the promotional stuff I saw, seems like either 90s or early 2000s F1. and apparently it's going to be more in depth with the world of racing, not just a racing game, you know, something like a generic racing game. I'm really interested to see how that pans out, how it turns out to be. That would be really interesting. If I could choose myself, if I could choose what kind of vintage sim to get, I would very likely pick a sort of like Grand Prix Legends, you know, in depth with a lot of detail and stylized like it's from the time period, because like in GPL it's even the menus or sometimes the lap times you look at, they're like they stylized to look like you're reading a paper, because that's what you've been doing in that time. So I'd really love essentially Grand Prix Legends, obviously, you know, modernized, better graphics, better everything, but from the 1950s season, pretty much any season from 1950 to like 1959 or something. I would love it, because for me, out of all the vintage cars, the 50s era is my favorite. I would love so much to have that kind of sim. Just imagine how fun it would be to have a modern sim with, you know, modern features and everything, modern wheel support, but let's say graphics something like Assetto Corsa, and the detail and simulation detail of Assetto Corsa, but focused entirely on vintage F1 cars. I think that would be just an amazing experience. There we go, finishing up the last lap. Going to be an easy win, but yeah, just how it goes sometimes, I guess. AI aren't really competitive here, as it turns out. This turned out this, I didn't really intend for this, but this almost turned out to be less of a video about me racing and more about me just rambling about about racing and sim racing while I just drive around. Honestly, half the purpose I made this video is to just practice commentating, because I want to commentate on more of my videos and get better at it. This video is more almost an excuse to commentate more and practice. Gonna pass that guy. We actually lapped someone. That's interesting. There we go. Coming onto the final straight. Going to be an extremely easy one, but yeah. Let's just roll to the line. There you go, first place. It was still really fun to drive. And yeah, that's about it. Hope it was at least somewhat enjoyable to watch. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much like an old man, but yeah, that's gonna be it. Thank you for watching, and see ya.